Hi, this is Michael, your host, and today we're with a new pet parent, part 2B, and we're going to continue our conversation with common ailments with Dr. Christina and Nelva. Thank you. So let's talk about GI issues, because I know there's so many different things that can happen with, their stomachs and all that. Where do you begin when or how do you identify a GI issue, Dr. Christina?
Well, that's a good question. I think whenever we think about GI problems, one of the first things that we tend to cross our head is diarrhea, right? So, my dog is really not going to the toilet properly and is just having accidents at home or potentially vomiting. You have the dog that overnight is vomiting and you wake up to a pile of vomit. So they are the two things that we tend to come across as the main GI issues. But obviously, this could be acute, this could be chronic, which basically means that they've gone for a long time. They could be winning and waxing kind of problems that sometimes they appear and then they get better and then they disappear. And then about a few weeks later, they come back again. So again, a bit of a cocktail of various clinical signs that they could be caused by many, many different things. And I think it's important, just take into consideration what are the most common presentations. So, Nelva, what do you normally tend to find whenever people come to your practice with a complaint of GI issues?
I'll just say one thing's a little frustrating, or I would say I don't know what to go for or determine when someone says, my dog or cat vomited once. And I usually say, okay. One time I'm not worried about. Now, if it gets frequent with one time today, a few days later, another time, I don't think I'm really worried there. I'm more concerned about if it's persistent. Then with the vomiting, you also have the pet now maybe refusing water, not wanting to eat. It all becomes a picture if you start painting a picture with it. But that one clinical sign alone is difficult to go with. And also, like I said, if it's like one time, it's really hard to make a determination. But as you said, let's go. We go into the history again. We start investigating the cause. Are my GI signs, such as either vomiting or diarrhea, are they due to any change in diet? What else? You have that either dietary, then makes you wonder, especially if you have a young puppy, is it viral, such as parvovirus? GI issues, even though it might seem like it's just one target area, you have to realize that there's a lot of things that can cause a pet to have vomiting and diarrhea, more than just, say, an upset stomach. It could be viral related. It could be related to a hormonal condition within their bodies too. I mean, it could be toxins or what have you. So I would say when someone comes in with a pet, main thing I'd want to do is just kind of, again, start asking my investigative questions.
What about Giardia that, dogs get from dog parks and, like everything that you're kind of describing, diarrhea, vomiting and all that, is that part of a GI issue?
That definitely is, and we have to be careful because Giardia, last I checked, Giardia is also something that we can get from our pets. So, yes. So within that history of just finding out where the pet has been, exposures, how you would make that determination if it's Giardia or not, you're going to have to do fecal analysis, send it off to a diagnostic lab, and they'll do an intestinal parasite screening and look for either it could be roundworms, hookworms, whipworms, Coccidia, Giardia. Not sure, Dr. Christina, if there's any further over in your neck of the woods, but those are the main ones here in the U.S. that the intestinal parasite screening would check for. And yes, these are all potential things they can get from going to a dog park.
Yeah, I just had a client, a friend, and she thought her dog ate something bad and was thrown up and had diarrhea, and she took him to the vet, and they thought maybe it was a bone, but then after they got the test results a few days later, they found out it was Giardia from a dog park. But, they weren't even at a dog park, so how else can they get it? And Dr. Christian, I would love to hear the follow-up for what Nelva was asking as well.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Nelva. We're pretty much the same here, in terms of fecal testing. Of course, you can kind of start looking, if you get those results negative and then you do your further investigations and then you start kind of moving into chronic cases of diarrhea, sometimes we have to take obviously the next step and start doing ultrasounds and taking biopsies and this and that and whatever, trying and do some bloods to look out for vitamin B12 deficiencies and all this palaver, and then obviously trying to find out what the underlying cause is. But from the point of view of infectious diseases, the problem we have to think about with dog parks, even if they haven't been in the dog park, I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys there, but to be honest, here, at least in the UK, that we are surrounded by green everywhere. And one of the things that I tend to find, for example, in the area where I work on a daily basis, is that yes, you can have areas where dogs kind of concentrate, but you don't necessarily you won't necessarily get those potential infectious conditions just from that particular area. You have to think about, you've got a dog that visits a corner, for example, and there's a little garden in there, and these dogs actually urinate in that area or defecate in that area, and people unfortunately haven't been as diligent as they should have been to obviously pick up their feces. And for whatever the reason, it rains a little bit too much. You're going to find areas of kind of natural collections of water, and then that area can be contaminated with Giardia, and then potentially another dog passed by and then he wants to smell a little bit and lick the grass a little bit and where that area has been contaminated, and boop, there you go, you get Giardia. So, it's actually something that it could pass on very easily. It could be on daycare, it could be in so many places where dogs actually get together. So it is important to take that into consideration. Another thing that is very, very important whenever you are in areas of high concentration of dogs, like daycare places and things like that, and I'm sure pretty much everyone does it, disinfection is absolutely vital to minimize these things. But yeah, going back to the diarrhea, so many different causes. So again, detective hat on, and I start kind of looking for the potential underlying cause.
It seems like sometimes when people change their dog's food, that's a big issue when it comes to diarrhea, because the dog has to acclimate to the new food. And so is there a level of diarrhea that somebody should be alarmed by, or should they start being alarmed the moment that they start to see diarrhea, Dr. Christina?
Well, with the vomiting, as Dr. Nell was saying, if they had diarrhea once, it happens to all of us. You go to a restaurant, you eat something different, and then the next day your tummy's not too happy, and then you get a little bit of tummy upset, and then you're going to get over it. That happens to us, that happens to dogs. What I would say is a little bit more important is consider how many times your dog suffers from diarrhea, what kind of product is produced with the diarrhea. And with this, I mean, whenever we look at the fecal chart, and we had this conversation before, Michael, it's so exciting. You normally tend to find, whenever we look at the fecal chart, you can go, and I'm going to give you my description of a fecal chart, okay? So you can go from liquid poo to something that we call Mr. Whippy. I don't know if you get Mr. Whippy there, but it's like a little bit of a mushy kind of a string, to something that we call a cow pat, which we all kind of have an idea what that is looking like. And then you get more of the solid, normal poops. And then obviously the normal poops, they are nice and pretty, which I'm not going to go into. But realistically, having that idea in your head whenever you're trying to describe to your vet what you normally see on a regular basis is very helpful. So what kind of poopy looks like? If for any reason you've seen any blood in the poop, if you see any kind of mucus in the poop, and how often it's happening. Because the same that we're saying that one odd occasion or a couple of times, if it happens during 24-hour period, is not going to be a problem. A dog, particularly when we are talking about puppies, can easily get dehydrated whenever they get diarrhea on a very regular basis. Because at the end of the day, there is quite a dramatic water loss through the gastrointestinal tract, if that's to be the case. Particularly when we've got a little baby that they don't really kind of regulate their body very, very well. So it is very, very important to take that into consideration. And in doubt, as I always say, please call the vet and check it out. And Dr. Nell, I think you possibly will suggest the same thing, won't you?
I was going to say the descriptor is soft serve, like soft serve ice cream. Because the frosty, I would call it cow patty, yes, and then like soft serve or formed, basically. So she was saying a frosty, but yeah, it's like soft serve ice cream kind of thing. But yes, I definitely agree with everything what Dr. Christina said regarding it. Thing also that I'll just pop in and add too, if you don't mind, is also look for if there's anything in it, like if you see intestinal parasites. Sometimes you can see tapeworms in it. Sometimes you can see roundworms in it, in the stool. Blood definitely is a bad indicator, and mucus. Well, blood worse than anything. Also, sometimes you might see blood, and also if it's digested blood, it's going to be tarry, like black. So those things are to mark and let us know when you bring in your pets and they have a history of diarrhea.
Talking about poop here with our dog, I have seen that with dogs in my past, and I'll see worms and I'm like, oh my God. And it just kind of like grossed me out. A kid, I was like, what's going on here? What causes all the worms? What causes that?
Go, Nova, go. You like your worms.
It all depends on the type of worm. I mean, I know roundworms you can see in the stool. Sometimes we give a dewormer. A lot of times they'll come out. Either the pet will digest them normally, or it will pass through their system so fast that these worms are coming out with the stool. And you might see spaghetti-like looking worms in the stool. And if you do, those are roundworms. If you see something that looks like rice or cucumber seed, something or sesame seed kind of size, sometimes it could be moving. Those are segments of tapeworms, which can easily be treated too. I think those are the most common ones here in the U.S. Giardia, you're not going to see it. Coccidia, you're not going to see it, and I don't think you will rarely see hookworms and whipworms in the stool, actual worms in the stool with that. So, but yeah. So the two main ones you might see are roundworms and tapeworms.
And I just love that you describe them as food products. Rice, spaghetti. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, it's disgusting as it may sound. I might eat spaghetti, but it doesn't look like that when it comes out. So if it comes out that way, and then again, I might eat rice. It doesn't look like that when it comes out. So if you see something that looks like all of a sudden now it's like spaghetti, it's like, how's that possible? Or even if eating rice, look, I'm going to be disgusting. The only food that comes out, in fact, is corn. So that's it.
So let's jump into the next one that's on the list here that we haven't talked about yet is bloating. Assuming like if you have this fit looking dog and they seem like they're always in health and all of a sudden you notice that their stomach is getting a little bigger and bigger and they're starting to bloat out. What is causing that, Dr. Christina?
Well, before we go any further, if you ever see that your dog is fine and suddenly within half an hour to an hour, even sometimes less than that, their stomach starts growing in size really rapidly and your dog seems in discomfort in any shape or form, please call your veterinarian straight away. Tell them that you're suspicious that your dog is bloating, and then they will tell you come straight down. And the reason being is whenever a dog gets air in their stomach, and it could well be because maybe it's just a very greedy dog and it's just literally eating his food so fast and swallowed a lot of air with it. The actual having a little bit of air in the stomach is not the problem. The problem is when that dog or the air in the stomach becomes in such a big size that potentially can lead to the stomach turning, and it could turn into what we call 360 degrees, to the point that if you think about a balloon, which is like the stomach, if you were to twist a balloon 360 degrees, the end of the balloon is only going to be twisted. But if you think about the end of the balloon, that's the area which contains all the blood vessels, all the nerves and everything else. So potentially whenever you twist it 360 degrees, those blood vessels are going to die. And that's the problem. You know, that is a true veterinary emergency. And I can't highlight it any more than what I'm saying. So hopefully if you catch it on time and the stomach isn't twisted, your vets will definitely get your dog to the back of the surgery, and most likely they're going to sedate him and put a little tube and try to obviously eliminate all that kind of air that is built up in the stomach plus whatever else is sitting in there, and kind of deflate the stomach. But it is very, very important that happens before the stomach turns, because once the stomach turns, then obviously apart from being a very, very high risky surgery, is that potentially the consequences of that problem could be fatal. So yeah, before we go any further on any other topics, please, if you ever see anything like that at all, please call us straight away. Any advice your end, Melva, about this?
No, my recollection with this is that it's very common in the breeds to have more of a deep chest. It's common in breeds, I believe, German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, might be also Great Danes and others, but It usually occurs after, say, getting a meal, and they go out and drink a lot of water, and they go play, and then all of a sudden they're running, and somehow it twists internally. But yes, it's extreme medical emergency. If you do not respond, your pet will not make it through that at all. So, but yeah, is it in your experience certain breeds, or just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to find this very rarely. Say deep-chested breeds, Great Danes, big dogs, German Shepherds, etc., etc. Excuse me. But it could also happen as well to a smaller breed. So don't necessarily rule them out because of the fact that they're smaller.
Is there something besides eating that will cause the bloatingness of their stomach? Is there like some sort of infection or bacteria growth or something like that people need to be, once they understand that they need to take their dog to the vet immediately and get this checked out? But what are the, what's the precursors to this? What causes this?
Well, as Nelva said, sorry, Nelva, you want to say?
No, I was going to say, as far as I know, there's no precursors. Well, it's just, again, a large meal, a lot of water, and then they're exercising right afterwards is what I thought was related to. I don't believe it's any bacterial cause or anything like that. It's just the amount that's being fed and water, and they're just running excessively after eating a large meal.
And on that topic as well, please, if you feed your dogs, don't take them for a walk immediately after. So it's just a prevention. Always take them for a walk first and then feed your dogs, just to minimize that this situation can arise.
When you say that, don't take your dog for a walk right after, I remember being a kid and I was like, I love swimming and I always wanted to jump in the swimming pool. And my mom, and I've heard this so many times from parents, they're like, oh, if you eat, you have to wait a half hour before you jump in the pool. And I never could understand why. Maybe it's something to do, something crazy like this, but I never heard that you should let your dog digest their food before you actually go out for a walk. I wonder how many parents really do that.
Well, the thing is that it's not necessarily to wait for the full digestion, but it's definitely important not to do it immediately after they're eaten, for the simple reason, as we said, they can have taken a lot of food, they can swallow some air with it, then suddenly drink some water, and then you've got a balloon full of things dinging along when they go out for a walk, and then suddenly, whoop, it's just going to turn, and that's where the problem starts. So this is a good way to prevent this situation happening in the first place. So as obviously, if you give them a little treat, it's not going to be a major problem. But realistically, if you're thinking about giving a full meal, it's just not worth the risk. So that's what I'm normally advised to my pet parents. And particularly, you've got a large breed, I would definitely avoid taking them out after a meal, just to be on the safe side.
And Noah, what do you think about this thought, talking about this? What about a dog? You've been around these dogs that they just pass gas all the time. Is it because they're eating too fast and they have the bloated stomach and they're just kind of like the air is going through them quickly? Or is there another reason why they have gas all the time?
I'm sorry, I never thought about it, but it will probably be the same. It also, I would imagine, also the food that they're eating, maybe the way they're digesting it, I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know fully. I would imagine it's a digestive issue, release of a lot of, gases and stuff.
I mean, I only laugh at this because being here in Clubhouse, I've learned so much about nutrition for animals and the best way to feed them and just really, make sure they're on a healthy diet and all that. And I've been really, my diet has really changed. It's pivoted, so much since I've been on Clubhouse, because here a lot of people are they eat well. I always thought that I ate well. And then now parents are, pet parents are really feeding their dogs better diets and treating them better. And, now I'm even looking at my diet again and really adjusting my diet. And I know now by me eating so clean and healthy and the way organic that I'm doing, if I went out to a Mexican restaurant, I'm screwed. I'm going to, like Dr. Christina said, I'm going to end up with diarrhea. I'm going to end up with gas. So I'm just thinking that's probably the same thing for our dogs. It's like what you're saying, Nelva. The nutritional value of the food that they're eating is so important, not just for just their health, just their overall well-being. I think we've kind of gone through the whole list of what we've talked about. The one last thing on your list, Dr. Christina, in your book on page 84 is dehydration. and it can, a cardiovascular shock can occur. Can we break into that a little bit?
Sure, we can. Basically, I think when we're talking about cardiovascular shock, is not one of the things that we tend to find, unfortunately, very often, unless the animal or the pet is really, really poorly. But certainly dehydration can lead to cardiovascular shock. Either dehydration is very severe. So pretty much what we were talking about before, if your dog is vomited once, it's unlikely it's going to become dehydrated. If it vomits it twice over a period of 24 hours, or 3 times over a period of 24 hours, I'll be a bit more concerned. But still, I don't think it's necessarily going to get dehydrated. As long as that water loss is being replenished, and then your dog is keeping the water down. However, if that vomiting happens over a period of an hour, that's a different story altogether. If your dog is just literally drinking water and then bringing it out completely, immediately afterwards and within a very short period of time, something is happening. And it's not necessarily the fact that it's just vomiting so often and potentially might indicate that there is a degree of blockage somewhere. The issue is that potentially that water loss is not being replaced. And there is only so much water that we can lose to be alive. And realistically, if that level of that water loss is not replenished by intravenous fluids and obviously trying to address the underlying problem, that could certainly lead to cardiovascular shock. So again, it's all about bearing in mind what is happening, how often it's happening, and particularly when we are talking about young animals, this basically is far more important than with adults because they just dehydrate so quickly. Their body is not designed to be very resilient. So if you see that something happens to your puppy that either vomits on a regular basis or has diarrhea, please call to your vet, because we will be always happy to see them and make sure that they're okay and then say to you, oh, nothing to be worried about, everything looks okay, let's going to try this, versus receiving in our clinic a puppy that is moribund because obviously it hasn't been attended to sooner than what it happened. So that's just basically the main thing to remember.
And Nelva, I would love to hear your take on this as well with the dehydration and just your point of view.
Yes, vomiting and diarrhea can lead to dehydration with the pet. If it's more frequent, persistent over a short period of time, then it can lead to dehydration. But main thing, as far as, like I said, one episode of vomiting or diarrhea is not a big deal. Once you get into more frequent lack of appetite, lack of drinking water, then it becomes definitely a life-threatening issue regarding the animal, and it'll need veterinary care to help replenish that loss of basically water in the body. And again, it's vital for our bloodstream, vital for our cells and everything. So if it's persistent and the pet becomes dehydrated, it's definitely a medical emergency.
I just thought, I suddenly remember a conversation that I had with another couple of people in one of the rooms in Clubhouse. And they were actually talking about taking their dogs out in the summer and they go trekking and obviously having water with them and things like that. And the dogs get super happy and it's a sunny day, it's a warm day, and dogs kind of forget to drink. Please watch out for any signs of dehydration that way too. So it's not necessarily the fact that it's just having vomiting and diarrhea and water loss that way. It could well be, as Dr. Nelva said, that they are not drinking enough. So if you're actually going in the middle of the summer in your beautiful California and other areas, which is beautifully warm and everyone goes out and about, do not forget to take water for your dogs and do not forget to offer them water on a regular basis. Because dogs won't tell you like we do, oh, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling thirsty. They would just keep going and keep going and keep going. And suddenly you find that obviously they're becoming slower. And by that time, the degree of dehydration could have been far more severe. So just remember that as well.
Yeah. And, let me tag on that too, Christina. Just made me think of the situations where sometimes people will go to lakes or even beaches. They need to realize lake water and maybe water at beaches and everything is not, it could be salt water. It could have potential algae or whatever, other pathogens in the water. So supply your fresh water, bottled water would be best. Don't allow your dog to drink out of lake streams or what have you.
It's one of the things I just love about our friend Kelly here in Clubhouse with her spleesh is the fact that you can carry your water with you, and it's going to be bottled water, especially salt water. I'm sure can really be, upsetting to the dog's system. I know we're getting towards the top of the hour here, and we still going through common ailments, so we're going to do a part 3 on this to get through the rest of it. But real quick, touching on like what Nelva was talking about, real quick, Nelva, how bad is salt water? Because like living here in California, I know a lot of people they sneak their dogs to the beaches that they don't allow dogs, and there are a couple of beaches here that they do allow dogs, and you see the dogs in the water all the time, and of course they're lapping and licking and all that. How bad is salt water for animals?
Well, one thing I would say we have to think about it. I mean, the same as we can't tolerate salt water. If we were stranded on a ship somewhere and we're in we don't drink the salt water. We don't drink that water because we know, and I can't start to get what it's going to do to our red blood cells. I believe our red blood cells will either rupture or, God, I forgot what it does. But we don't drink salt water if we're stranded. And they're mammals as we are. They can't handle it either. It's going to interfere with, I want to say osmosis. Yeah, so it's going to cause the red blood cells, I believe, to either rupture or crenate. And I can't remember which way with that process, but it's going to impact my red blood cells. And that's my oxygen carrying capacity in my body. And I don't need to impair that in any form of function.
I'm so excited that we touched on that, especially here in California. We have the beaches. The one last thing I want to close with is I did this event this weekend yesterday, and I was talking to Ranger Ken, who is our ranger in the park while we did our event, and he was telling me, because I started talking about Clubhouse and all the rooms that we do together and about Dog's House and all that, and he's like, oh my God, he goes, what's really upsetting to me? And I'm like, what? He goes, we have search and rescue for humans, but we don't have search and rescue for dogs. And he goes, just, last week, what Dr. Christina and you guys are talking about was that owner took her dog out, just like a beautiful day, and the dog just was going and going and going and going. And 3 miles into the mountains, and they get a 911 call to the ranger park saying, my dog has collapsed and she won't move, and I can't carry her because she's too heavy. What do I do? And of course, they don't have search and rescue, helicopters going in and saving dogs. So they actually took their little tractor out and they went up in the mountains and they rescued the dog. And it was exactly what you guys were talking about. The dog was dehydrated. Was so excited to be outside, sniffing all the wonderful new smells that are on hills. And I don't know if this was part of the owner forgetting too, because they were just in such a beautiful place that they forgot to, make sure that their dog was hydrated. But I think this is really key, and I'm so glad we brought it up, because talking to Dr. Ranger Ken, who was so cute, and the fact that he was so, he was so sweet, the way he felt so proud that they were able to save this dog. And I was so excited to see his love in his eyes, that he was like, they were able to rescue this dog. And they said they had took 2 of them to lift him up, because it was a pretty big dog and she was just kind of dead weight. But by the time they got her back into the ranger station and hydrated her, she was back to normal, and it looked like she was ready to go back for another hike. So I'm so happy we touched on this today.
Oh, and I'm so glad that the dog is okay. That's fantastic. So yeah, let's spread the message for everyone this summer. Do make sure that you take some water with you.
Definitely. Look, preventive care while you're hiking, just preventive things. Actually, probably traveling with your car and your vehicle anyway. Have a water source. The spleesh. Is it called again, Michael? I can forget. Is it spleesh?
It's spleesh, yes.
Yeah. Get spleesh, or have some other form of having a fresh water or bottled water for your pet available at all times.
Yeah, it's so important. And, in closing, one of the things with Dr. Katie Woodley that does, she's a holistic vet that I do a room on Fridays with, just talking about water in general for your dogs. One of the best things you can do to start going holistic and just really increasing your dog's health is she even advised not even bottled water, but getting a water purifier and making sure all your dog's water, just like your own water, is purified because of all the different properties and toxins in our city water. And she lives in Colorado, and she was surprised to see how toxic her water was there. So, since we're we're on the topic of water and we're about to close out the room, I just wanted to share that information as well. Like if you have a dog and for yourself, for your own health, is get a purifier and fill up your containers or your spleesh, whatever it is for your dog, and take it out for the day. And so she said that was the number one baby step to start into helping your dog's health is giving them purified water, which I've always done. You know, I'm in between dogs right now, but I've always done bottled water. And she's like, even like the bottled water is not the best because sometimes these companies just pour it out the tap and put it in the bottle and say, oh, it's purified. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit about the water, but I'm just excited that we ended up on this topic at the end of the room today. And I wanted to thank Dr. Christina and Nelva for being here. Tammy, thanks for hanging in there with us today. I hope you walk away today with some knowledge of, all this information Dr. Nelva and Dr. Christina shared. Julie, I see that you just joined us. We're about to close out the room, but in closing, Dr. Christina.
Well, just make sure that you drink water with you. So if your dog has any GI problems, you can actually replenish the water losses. Obviously, if your dog has issues with vomiting and diarrhea more than once or twice, and if we would say more than once, talk to your vets about it. And yeah, just try to avoid allowing your dog to drink from puddles whenever they're out and about, because you never know what's growing in that water. And obviously clean after your dog to make sure that no other dogs can get issues either, and avoid them to pick things up from the ground, because most of the cases that we tend to find not most of the cases, but a large majority are actually what we call dietary insults. So basically a dog has just been walking and someone left a bag of chips or something that they've eaten, or the leftover of a burger, the dog goes, eats it, and then a few hours later because of diarrhea. So if we can try to avoid that happens, if you see that something is left, try to move from that area to avoid that the dog can be tempted. That would be my last advice about this topic. Thank you, Michael, for getting this room together as usual.
Of course. Nelva, what would be your top pointers from our conversation today?
Awesome. I mean, just tagging along with Dr. Christina, yes, I agree totally what she said there. I know we didn't get into it more, probably a topic for another discussion, but just be aware of feeding your pet table foods and foods that are not for pets, your fried chicken or what have you. A gentleman told me he had a baked potato and his dog ate his baked potato with sour cream and chives. I was like, oh. There's many reasons why you don't want to give table food besides the vomiting and diarrhea, but either way. GI issues, if it's a persistent vomiting and diarrhea, it's definitely a veterinary emergency.
Well, thank you, Nelva, so much, and Dr. Christina. And thank you once again, Tammy, for hanging in there. And I hope, once again, you walk away with so much information today. Michael, we're in the New Pet Parent. We're discussing Dr. Christina's book. We are in Common Ailments Part 2. We're going to do Common Ailments Part 3 so we can continue on through next week will be dental diseases. And so we can actually break that down as well. So, ladies, thank you very much for today, this evening, Dr. Christina. And I will see you guys in Clubhouse, around Clubhouse, and definitely next week. Everybody have a beautiful evening and afternoon. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Timmy.
Thank you, Nova. Bye-bye. Thank you, Michael, as always. Nice to see you.